Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting in just a moment now at 11 o'clock for our theme of emotional intoxication through selling. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. Our theme today is emotional intoxication through selling. Is this absurd? Is this an oxymoron? Is this a necessity? Is this a necessity? So self-image is really important to our success in selling. This webinar is an internal look at selling. Now, there are so many people in our culture who see selling as something slimy, as dramatized in the book Death of the Salesman by Arthur Miller, where the anti-hero, Willy Loman, is presented as a slimy loser, a cheat, someone who cheats on his wife, someone who has a miserable life and commits suicide at the end. And whether or not the people we meet when we sell have read this book, they've certainly been influenced by the imagery in there, the negative imagery of the salesperson. And that makes it very difficult for us when we get out there, that people have this negative view of salespeople. But what might make it even worse is there are a lot of salespeople who have internalized this view in their minds. So you might call this a self-limiting assumption. Pictured here is Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. What an accomplishment. Do you know, until he did it in the early 1950s, everybody thought it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile. Our lungs, our heart, our sinews, there's no way a human being could run a 4-minute mile. That was a self-limiting assumption. And in the year after he broke the 4-minute mile, do you know that somebody beat his record? So self-limiting assumptions can shut us down, and it's bad enough that we face a society which has been influenced on negative views of salespeople and even on business. You could say that Death of a Salesman is a critique of capitalism, which is a very negative thing. But what's even worse is very often salespeople internalize this view and they shut themselves down right from the outset. And they won't do the things that need to be done to succeed as a salesperson. And this is so unfortunate because in reality, we salespeople, we're heroes. This is well dramatized in a book called Hero with 1,000 Faces by an anthropologist, Joseph Campbell. Campbell studied hero myths over thousands of years and hundreds of cultures to codify the quest or the journey of the hero. And we're going to visit that for a moment before we go back to selling. So what is this journey of the hero? In a classic myth, think about this for a moment. In a classic myth you might have read when you were younger, it's set 400 or 500 years or thousands of years ago. There's a village, and all of a sudden, cattle are disappearing, and maybe some people are dying or vanishing, and there's whispering, there's a dragon that's moved into the neighborhood. So when enough people and cattle go missing, the king, the queen, the vizier, the mayor calls everybody into the town square, and there's an announcement. There's a dragon in the neighborhood. We need somebody to go forward as a champion to go out and kill the dragon, and if you kill the dragon and cut off its head and bring the head back, well, you get half of the fortune of the mayor or the king or the vizier or the queen, and you get to marry the son and daughter if you're the marrying type. That's the announcement. And if we zoom in on this picture in the town square, you'll notice that everybody's got pretty much a downcast face. People are shuffling their feet. Nobody wants to volunteer. And then all of a sudden, somebody says, I'll go. Wow. So this person goes out and typically has many adventures before facing the dragon, right? Has many adventures. Meets some friends, meets some enemies, has some conquests. And because this is a worthy person, they get magical gifts like the cloak of invisibility, or the shield of invincibility, of the sword of invincibility. Or finally, after many adventures, this person is face to face with the dragon, and they have a climactic battle, wields the sword, kills the dragon, cuts off the head, brings it back to civilization, gets the reward. Central question here is, at what point of the story does this person become a hero? You know, I've been asking this question for, I don't know, 15 years in sessions and teaching, and some people reasonably think it's when they kill the dragon or when they come back to society and are celebrated. The answer that Campbell gave, which is in culture after culture, is when the person raises their hand and volunteers. Why? Because they're facing great uncertainty. Just as an aside, one of the inscriptions on the back of the book is by a guy named George Lucas, who said that when he created Star Wars, he was very much influenced by this book. Now, we face dragons as salespeople, but they're not your classic fire-eating dragons with the flame coming out. They're dragons of the mind. Salespeople face dragons of the mind like ignorance and bias and complacency and laziness, and most importantly, the closed mindset. We face and overcome the closed mindset. And in order to do this, we need to be on the 5 sales crusades, which we'll touch on and return to in a moment. So this webinar is a celebration of salespeople as heroes. And why are they heroes? Because we go out and we face the unknown. That's what we do. You know, in baseball, if you bat 300, it's pretty good. Most functions in a business, we expect to be doing it right all the time. But in selling, if you bat 300, you could get rich. You could fail 70% of the time and get rich and make your company very successful. So today is a celebration of selling. From Hero with 1,000 Faces, we get the idea of the worthy sales hero. The worthy sales hero takes chances. He or she goes out. They face uncertainty. They face rejection, right? And they also make a supreme effort. Now, this activity, our activity as salespeople, this is what gives us self-confidence and self-worth. We're doing something meaningful. I've been a member of a philosophy club for over 22 years, and we read about 15 years ago, we read some works of Nietzsche. And from Nietzsche comes the idea of emotional intoxication, the theme of today's webinar. In his book, Twilight of the Idols, I remember reading this passage. The essential thing about intoxication is the feeling of increased power and plenitude. And that, about 15 years ago, set me on the path to finding this formula for emotional intoxication. Again, it was inspired by Nietzsche, but I just kind of discovered it through introspection. And so now I'm offering it to you. This will set you on fire, on flame, this formula. It starts with moral certainty. We also need the meditative state. And of course, the heroic mindset, which we've already discussed. And that will get you to emotional intoxication, a sustainable state of both end and means. It's an end. It's because how we want to experience life. It's not money, in my view, that drives us in selling. It's this exhilarated mind state, right? But it's not only the end, it's also the means, because when we're in this mind state, we're more productive. I find I'm more creative, and that leads to creating more states of emotional intoxication. So it's means and end. Let's look for a moment at the 5 sales crusades. The heroic salesperson embarks on 5 sales crusades, which compose our sales culture. First, on our own behalf, on ourself. We crusade for ourselves for a better life. Then the company for which we work. We're aligned with the company and crusading on its behalf. Then the rest of the team that is not selling depends upon us. If we didn't bring in sales, they'd have no work. Most importantly, on behalf of the prospect, the client, this is the irony in our job, is this person is resisting us. They're saying, go away, I'm good. And yet in the end, When we show them what we could do for them, they become great friends. And finally, there's the higher cause. And I submit to you, one universal higher cause, what we do is we open the closed mind. So one of our central challenges in selling is the I'm good challenge. The prospect says I'm good. In my estimation, this shuts down 80 to 90 or 95% of all possible interactions. What do we do in the face of I'm good? We need this strong self-belief, a crusade mentality to persevere in the face of I'm good. If you think of the urgency meter, when we first talk to a prospect, maybe they have some interest. On a scale of 1 to 10, they're at a 1. Now, in our next webinar, we're going to talk about increasing the client's urgency meter. But today, our focus is not going to be as much on the client as about on ourselves. Today, we're going to discuss our sense of urgency, our personal urgency. Are we setting an example with a sense of urgency and self-belief in what we do? So again, next time, the next webinar is how do you move the urgency meter for the client? And by the way, in my CRM, everybody gets a score from 1 to 10 on the urgency meter. So where do we get this strong self-belief? The client is in a second best scenario, and we raise them up to an optimal scenario. Think of a cliff that's really a false summit. The prospect is on it, they're looking down. Our job in selling is to get them to look up. That's the core to selling. But when we look at the formula for emotional intoxication, it has another value. The true summit, the vision of the true summit, what we could do for a client earns us the right to access, but it also gives us moral certainty. We feel good about what we do. It's the exact opposite of what some people would push on us, this Willy Loman, slimy loser who's a cheat. That's the opposite of what we do. We bring people to the true summit of value, what we can do for them. We take them on a journey on the change curve. Now, the material here on this slide comes from a book called On Death and Dying. And the basic underlying idea is that all change involves grieving. So when we meet a prospect, they say, I'm good. They're in denial. And if we keep on showing them more and more proof, they might actually get resistance towards us, closed mindset. But they don't know what they don't know. We offer type 3 knowledge. They don't know what they don't know. So we move that prospect through bold vision, bold behavior, and proving to exploration. We open the closed mind and bring them to hope and ultimately commitment at a higher level of well-being. And the whole story here in selling is taking somebody from closed mindset to learning mindset. That's what we do. We open the closed mind. It's a major reason why we're heroes. It's a major reason why we're heroes. Let's look at our work through a different prism. Hang on a second, I just want to check something. Yep, I was just verifying we had a good internet connection here. I didn't see that. Let's look at our work through a different prism right now. Managerial versus entrepreneurial. What do those words mean to you? A managerial process is highly predictable. An entrepreneurial process is not as predictable. So the difference is predictability. And one of the reasons that we're heroes in selling is because of how we deal with unpredictability. What are our tools again? Bold vision, bold behavior, proving our case. There are 6 levers we could push to make business development more predictable. Introductions, that's the easiest. Do or die effort, bold vision, bold behavior. Creativity, going out of the box. Technique, your standard sales call, and structure. Where do you go in the food chain? Today's focus is more on, are we making a do or die effort? So let's look again at the formula for emotional intoxication. Moral certainty, and we get our moral certainty from having the vision of how we can move somebody to a higher level of well-being, plus the meditative state, which we're going to talk about last, plus the heroic mindset gets us to emotional intoxication. So again, we've talked about how the moral certainty comes from bringing somebody from a false summit to a true summit by getting them to look up. That is the core of selling. We need to apply Nietzsche's idea of the self-propelled wheel. This comes from Thus Spake Zarathustra. New business developers must be a little bit like perpetual motion organisms. We need to constantly inject new energy and urgency into the sales process. So it's not a good idea to call a prospect and say, hey, what's going on? Do you have anything new for me today? It is a good idea to always bring a new idea to the prospect. Bring a new idea to the prospect. So let's look a little bit at the heroic mindset, which is the core to stepping out, to uncertainty, to conquering, to that exhilarating feeling of accomplishment. How do you develop the heroic mindset? By facing uncertainty, rejection, by opening the closed mind. These are heroic acts. If you do it once, it's a heroic act, but if you do it every day, we develop the heroic mindset. So it's by constant practice that we develop the self-image of the hero, because we're doing this every day. And this is core to the emotional intoxication. Take a little look here at a do or die effort. And although this is mostly on internal, I would like to offer one suggestion. Are we sending out handwritten notes? It's so old, it's new. Now let me show you what this can add up to. I typically get out 5 to 10 handwritten notes a week. I'm sending them out as snail mailings, not only the handwritten note, but I'm sending stuff. My first book, my second book, my brochure, etc. When I started this year, I had 330 prospects I was working in the pipeline who had all received at least 2 snail mail mailings from me. By the end of the year, 28 people said that they might do business with us, and I forgot to update it. It says 3. It's now 4 new clients so far this year. Selling is hard work. The worthy sales hero works very hard. So you might want to stop for a moment if you haven't had this as part of your practice and ask, where can you send some notes? So we have moral certainty, the higher state of well-being. We have the heroic mindset, bold vision, bold behavior in the face of adversity. This gets us to the exhilarated mind state, but you could burn out in there. I have a condition I noticed about 20 years ago. I call it brain fire, and you can't function effectively. So we need to leaven it with the meditative state. So let's talk about the meditative state for a minute or so. How do you get there? What's involved? Curiosity, thoughtfulness, listening, learning. And when you don't know a subject, the beginner's mindset. That means approach it like a child. And when we've opened the prospect into a conversation, it means we have to listen, not tell. That's part of how we earn the right to close the sale, is by being curious and listening. From good to great, the idea of level 5 leadership is discussed. An indomitable will, strong, yet humble and open to learning. So a check-in point here for all of us, including me, is, are we humble enough, right? Company comes first, confront brutal facts, conduct autopsies without blame. Are we humble enough? Let's do a quick exercise for the meditative state, inspired in part by Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. We need to think slow. I want you to join me in a quick meditative exercise that I have found is very helpful. Just follow me through 2 breathing sets. Put your hands on your lap close your eyes and take a deep breath now from the gut. Expand your belly. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've just done one iteration. I want to do it with you again so you can remember what it feels like. This is something great to do when your mind is racing, when you're having palpitations. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you do this for 5 minutes. What you're doing is you're purging carbon dioxide from your body. Do it with me again. Breathe in, close your eyes, hands on lap. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we've done 2 sets. Now you have a feel of what it's like, right? You're purging carbon dioxide from your body, and it helps bring you down. Because I find when I get into that brain fire state, when I'm too emotionally intoxicated, I can't function at all. So in conclusion on this point, we need to ask ourselves, are we coachable? Are we humble? Are we self-aware? Can we come down off the throne of habit? That's all part of the meditative mindset. Admiral Grace Hopper famously said the most dangerous phrase in the language is, we've always done it that way. We've always done it that way. So to review, as we come to the end of today's session, a formula for emotional intoxication. We start with moral certainty. We add the meditative mindset. And the outward motion is the heroic mindset. It's the facing uncertainty. It's the bold vision, bold behavior, right? And it's managing unpredictability. This reliably gets me to a state of emotional intoxication, of both means and an end. Well, we all know that Rome wasn't built in a day. I have a couple of announcements, but think about your takeaways, if any, from today's session. What were your takeaways? On March 9th, we're going to do the urgency meter again, but this time we're going to look outwards. We're going to look at creating client urgency with the premise that we have a sense of urgency and we're marching towards emotional intoxication. I'm going to have a second webinar on March 9th for sales leadership. You're all welcome to come to it. It's on being an entrepreneurial sales manager. How do you become an entrepreneurial sales manager? By the way, I have a client who's looking for a sales VP. If you know anybody who's interested, please pass this on and let them get in touch with me. And also, I'm looking for a sales trainer to help me deliver urgency-based selling. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And if you have any questions, send me an email. I look forward to hearing with you. Bye now.